whale of a storm. We better run and hide.
It'll be your hide if you turn tail, Percy. Be brave! Brave the way!
Why do we like horror? I think there's a lot of reasons, but I think one that we often overlook is the factor of nostalgia. Because of nostalgia, we often look at our childhoods with a sense of joy, wonderment, wishing that we could get back to that feeling, wishing that we could go back and see the street we grew up on, wishing that we could see our favorite toys, the basketball that we used to play with, etc. But many of us also know and understand that we have skeletons in our closet too. There's things that we experienced growing up that were difficult. We didn't have the tools to understand them that we have now, and that's okay. And I think horror can be cathartic in that way. It can help us understand what we couldn't understand as children. And I think that's one of the reasons why many horror shows and movies are able to effectively convey these themes with children growing up into adults and going back to battle their demons, whether figuratively or in most cases with these forms of entertainment, literally. It's hard to understand why someone is depressed. It's hard to understand anxiety. But if you can take the hard to understand and intangible things in life and make them into a clear and physical villain, then it's really, really easy to see why it's scary. It's really fun to watch it lose. And it's really terrifying when it wins. I think this is an effective tool when it comes to horror. I want to give a brief spoiler warning and explain the plots for several of the stories that we'll be talking about today. So for It Chapter 1, the story focuses on 7 children in the town of Derry, Maine, as they face off against a shape-shifting evil figure that emerges every 27 years to prey on the children of the town. Over the course of a summer, they must battle their own personal fears and face off against the bloodthirsty monster known as Pennywise the Clown.
Egg boy.
In It Chapter 2, the story picks up with the children, now adults, returning back to their hometowns of Derry, Maine, and trying to figure out if they are going to face this fear head on or run from it.
No one wants to play with the clown anymore.
The Haunting of Hill House is a TV show that premiered on Netflix. The plot alternates between 2 timelines. We follow 5 adult siblings as they deal with the fallout of the paranormal experiences that they had when they were children at the Hill House mansion. We also follow the story in flashbacks, depicting the events that led up to one fateful night in the house in 1992, when the family had to flee from the mansion. The Vigil is a film from 2019, where a young, formerly Orthodox Jewish man agrees to fulfill the duties of a shomer, involving a ritualistic practice of looking after a dead body over the course of one night. We'll also be looking at the show Channel Zero, specifically the first season, titled Candle Cove. We pick up with a man who has returned to his hometown, where he begins to recollect on a mysterious children's TV show from the 1980s. His friends and colleagues also remember this show, but they all seem to remember it a bit differently, and it seems that there is something a bit more sinister beneath what they originally imagined of the show.
Доктора говорят, циррhosis.
The last film we'll be looking at is a bit of a break from the horror genre. The 2005 American film A History of Violence, directed by David Cronenberg, stars Viggo Mortensen as main character Tom Stahl, owner of a diner who is thrust into national news when he stops 2 would-be robbers in a rather violent manner and attracts the attention of a stranger named Carl Fogarty, played by Ed Harris. Stephen King talked about the importance of making sure that Pennywise's forms were scary to children and the characters in the story. In The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Branden, he says, "The greater a child's terror and the earlier it is experienced, the harder it becomes to develop a strong and healthy sense of self." One of the clearest depictions we have of this quote in media is the story of It. Think about the character of Bill. It's very difficult for Bill to grow beyond the trauma of losing his younger brother. Now, this makes sense in real life and in the story. But of course, in real life, we would not have to deal with losing a younger brother and also having to battle an evil clown. So, think about your own experience. Think about if you went through something as difficult as losing a sibling or a loved one. Now, that would be something that's hard to deal with. And it doesn't make sense. Loss never really makes sense. But if you can frame it through the eyes of defeating evil, through the eyes of defeating a shape-shifting clown, for instance, then that would create a cathartic experience. That would create something that can be helpful to watch for many people. So when we think about why these movies are successful, why these things are popular, it's helpful to understand how our own experiences shape the things that we view. Similar to the story of It, we have Channel Zero's Candle Cove, where again the main character has to deal with the loss of his brother, but in a way that's surrounded by a supernatural context, and in a way that's difficult to understand and deal with. If a supernatural context and horrifying characters in a television show can be added into reality to help us understand these kind of events better, then I think it would be beneficial for us to experience them and watch them, at least to an extent that we can handle. And a similar thing goes with The Vigil as well. In The Vigil, again, we see a character who has gone through an intense bout of trauma, this time both physical in being physically assaulted on the street, and spiritual. He has left his Orthodox Jewish faith and is trying to get away from the community, but can't really seem to get out. We see him talking with other people in a similar situation, and we get the sense that this has been difficult for everyone, but especially for our main character, Yakov. Through staying the night at this house and watching over this body, he understands more of himself, and he also understands more of his past through the horrors that he faces. This is not to say that horror is the only way that we can understand the consequences of our past, or that everything about our past is wrong. Not at all. But oftentimes we're bad at dealing with hard things, and we're bad at dealing with hard things from our childhood when we want to imagine that things were happier. So I believe that these films can be a helpful tool. So it's obvious how we can see these things in the media that we're analyzing here today. Be it the children in The Haunting of Hill House, moving through their own childhood traumas and struggles into adulthood dealing with addiction, depression, anxiety. Be it the children of It, moving from struggles like racism, death, loss, sexuality, moving into adulthood, having not overcome those things. And each of these elements, each of these stories being accentuated by a villain, by a ghost, by a demon. Something that makes it feel more tangible in a sense, because those are things that we've all been scared of. And though we can each relate on some level or another to the emotional, psychological, and physical struggles of the character, our senses are heightened when we're able to see that there is a real physical danger immediately present. We can even see this play of nostalgia and horror in other forms of entertainment that aren't immediately apparent as horror. Let's take, for example, A History of Violence from director David Cronenberg. Now, in this story, we see Viggo Mortensen's character, and while he looks to be the typical every American man who wants to live a simple life, he's got the regular American dream planned out. It's happening for him, right? And then we can see when the violence begins to happen in the story, it's quite horrific. And as David Cronenberg is someone who has had a lot of experience with horror, especially in his earlier days of directing, we see that the violence that's inflicted on other people is quite horrific. It's scary. It's not fun to watch. It's something that makes us grimace or kind of move ourselves backward in our seats. And through using that visual language, we're able to move from a place of feeling like a character has everything together to being horrified at what this character might have experienced in their past, to being scared to go backward with them, just as we're scared with Bill, just as we're scared with the children of Hill House, just as we're scared with the characters in The Vigil. These things are hard to watch. We don't want to go backward and see the worst parts of our former lives. We only want to go forward. We want to experience the best. We want to experience life in the diner. Let's try to apply this to the real world, as silly as it may seem. But let's take the situation like in It, a film that we've referenced quite a bit in this video. But instead of going back to fight the shape-shifting evil clown, what if all the other characters said, you know what? Yeah, our childhoods were scary. A lot of people actually got hurt, including myself. But we also had fun. We got to jump in the lake. We got to ride our bikes. We laughed. We joked around. We poked fun at each other. We got to play video games. We got to eat candy. It really wasn't all that bad when you think about it. What would that mean for future generations? What would that mean for the characters themselves? We see that Pennywise is indiscriminate in who he chooses to murder and take advantage of. So our characters wouldn't really be safe. They wouldn't benefit from ignoring the violence, ignoring the things that went wrong. They would get hurt further, and so would strangers. In real life, we were even successful maybe. And yeah, maybe some other people kind of got lost on the way to the end. But if I start trying to fix it now, I might find some things I don't like. Are we willing to struggle with that? Are we willing to hold two unalike things at once? A lot of us aren't, and it's understandable as to why. But if you take anything from this video, I want to encourage you to be able to look at the past and to struggle with the hard things in it, and to bring them to the present, and to, in the present, be able to right wrongs and make things better for future generations. Nostalgia is powerful. We can overlook a lot of things. We can overlook a lot of hurt. We can be okay with a lot of people getting pushed to the wayside for our own success. And we can even try to become completely different people. But if we don't deal with our problems in a constructive way, eventually they will come back, and someone else or ourselves could easily get hurt. Hey, thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. I really appreciate it if you stuck around. I know that there were some things that can be improved in this video, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where we can go in the future. I want to give a special shout out to the 3 people on Patreon that currently support me. John Sims, Keely Smoot, and Cody Metcalf. To anyone else that watched and enjoyed the video, please give me a like and just share the video. That's really the biggest thing that I could ask. And I would really, really appreciate it if you could just share it with a friend and just give me feedback. Let me know what you enjoyed. Let me know what you would like to see in the future. If you're considering being a supporter on Patreon, I really appreciate it. Know that I don't take that lightly, that's a part of your own personal money. If you do decide to do that, again, I really appreciate it. Again, thanks for watching the video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. And please like, subscribe, comment, share the video. Again, let me know what you thought. Links for Patreon will be here on the video and down below in the description. You can also send me an email if you would like. Just let me know anything or give me any feedback. And I hope you have an amazing day.